Okay, welcome everyone to the IMAG Multiscale Modeling Funding Opportunity Informational Webinar. My name is Grace Peng, and I am the chair of the Interagency Modeling and Analysis. And I am so happy to see you all online. This informational webinar really is to just present to you to summarize the funding opportunity announcement that IMAG has reissued. And I see we have several of the IMAG program contacts online. First of all, I want to introduce Dr. Manana Sukarerva, who is the Scientific Review Officer who is organizing the review for this initiative. Manana, do you want to say hi? We can't hear you, Manana.
Hello, everybody. Happy to see you, everybody. So there are some of you who served on the panel. I really appreciate your work, past work, and I'm expecting you to participate in the future. So, and anyone who is online and who would be willing to participate on the review panel, please send me your email and tell me that you will be willing to do it. So I'm currently recruiting for the coming up meeting in this summer round, but we'll have for the next 4 years, I believe, every round. That's all.
Thanks, Manana. Thanks. And we have several program officers online. I actually have a slide with all the program officers, so I'll wait till I get to that slide, and then I'll give the program officers an opportunity to talk about their interest. So with further delay, I'll start the presentation. As you can see on the IMAG wiki page, there is a link to the presentation. And as well, the information for the video connection. Ask if you all can mute yourselves so we don't have any crosstalk. Thank you. So I will mute all.
Hello?
Okay. So you are all automatically muted. If you'd like to talk, please unmute yourself. If you're not talking, please mute yourself back on. So hopefully this will improve the reception. So I will go ahead and start the presentation, and like to save some time actually for the actual discussion that I hope to have with all of you to answer any questions you might have. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is an informational webinar and again, just to remind you all, you can double click on the shared screen so you can project the presentation on full screen if you can't see anything in particular, or you like to see more details. So this is an informational webinar for PAR 15085, and that's the NIH identification for the reissued Multiscale Modeling Initiative, which we had conducted for 3 years, 9 receipt dates, and now we have another 3 years and 9 receipt dates. And we actually have 7 agencies on board now. The icons are listed: NIH, NSF, Department of Energy, ARO, ONR, FDA, and NASA. And we recently, actually, for those of you who are paying attention, we recently had NHLBI join back on board. So NHLBI is back on board the NIH list. So this is the presentation that I actually have been circulating to everyone who has submitted letters of intent to me. to give them ideas of how to write their application. It is also this presentation which Manana will allow me to present to the reviewers. So this way, the reviewers will see programmatically what we are saying and to close the loop so everyone's on exactly the same page. So the tips to the applicants are the first tip is that if you look at the announcement, so if you want to open up the announcement, actually, just put PAR-1085 into your browser and open up the announcement. And you may be able to follow me a little bit better because I do refer to different sections in the announcement. So in section 1 of that announcement are the list of bullets of which IMAG has put together as we identified as the cutting edge challenge that we would like to be addressed in these proposals. And the next 3 slides will show these challenges. And so I've been asking the applicants to identify which challenges you are addressing. And so if you'll notice, some of the challenges are kind of general sounding, and you may be saying that your model is already addressing that, but it would be very helpful for a program to understand the research that's being proposed to address that challenge. So that may take away some of the bullets from the list. As I go on, you'll understand what I'm talking about. So that means you may only be describing new research in the proposal for only one of the challenges, but your proposal may actually satisfy 5 of the challenges because you're using things that we are interested in, but you're not actually doing research for those things. Hopefully I'll be more clear as we go through the challenges. So I'm also asking the applicants to form highly interactive partnerships that truly integrate diverse expertise. This is written in the research plan of the application or in the bio sketches or in the budget justification. So again, we do not expect any of the challenges to be able to be addressed by a team of 1, not really a one-person show, but we expect that you will need diverse expertise in order to address these challenges, and that's why we are encouraging that. Section 4 of the guidelines are basically the instructions to the applicants, and I would strongly encourage you to print that out and read that very carefully, because that is how those include required components that you need to complete. If any of those components are not there, your proposal will be withdrawn from the system. So again, here's the link, and again, feel free to follow as I show you the challenges. I'll pause here for a minute if anyone has any questions. Okay, so if you flip to section 1 of that link, we start the bullets. We have the bullets of our cutting edge challenges. And I'll read through them, and usually I don't read through them very carefully when I'm doing a presentation in public, but since we're all here, I can read it to you. So we're really promoting a next generation multi-scale models that integrate between different scientific fields. So again, the cutting edge part is perhaps integrating between cardiovascular and neuroscience, predicting integrative functions between fields. That's something that is of interest to us. Higher level models and modeling approaches that integrate multiple physiological and possibly psychological systems in order to better understand the human response. For example, extended space flight and other unique environments. So in particular, agencies such as NASA and ONR are very interested in this particular bullet, as you can imagine. In section 1, we also have the specific interest areas of each of the agencies. And I would strongly encourage you to contact the agencies. So in particular, NASA, if you're interested, to contact them so they can talk to you further about their interests in terms of their interest in space flight and using this initiative to address their interests. Third bullet. Novel methods to fuse data-rich and data-poor scales to enable predictive modeling. Novel methods to fuse biological and behavioral processes and mechanisms to model outcomes as a result of various interventions. Reproducible and reusable multiscale models that will be integrated and adopted into model core fields, for example, tissue engineering, regenerative medicine, drug and gene delivery, preventative interventions. Multiscale models strongly coupled with standardized protocols for model-driven data collection. Now, this is just the first page of the bullets, but just to show you an example. So, for example, you may be using standardized protocols for model-driven data collection. Now, when you're identifying the bullets that you're addressing, you would only identify the bullets in which you're actually conducting new research for the proposal. So you wouldn't identify this bullet because you're using standardized protocols. But if you're developing standardized protocols as part of your proposal, then you would list this bullet. Does that make sense? So, second page. We're interested in implementing virtual clinical trials with multiscale models to predict outcomes. We're interested in problem-driven multiscale models that require high-performance computing. So again, if you're using high-performance computing, you would not identify this bullet. But if you're developing some new algorithm that would enhance high-performance computing or have some research problem that would be tied to high-performance computing, then you would identify this bullet. Model predictions that drive a community of experimentalists towards systematic testing and validation. Again, this is something where we would be interested in new research in this area. Predictive multiscale models that strongly incorporate uncertainty quantification. We have a series of bullets on population and behavioral modeling, which we're trying to promote. This particular one is mechanistic multiscale models that bridge to the population level to capture more clinical and biological realism for the population. Models that generate testable hypotheses regarding biological underpinnings of behavioral and social phenomenon and processes at the individual and population level. Models that describe mechanisms through which outside the skin factors such as behavioral stressors, social bonding, and parenting behavior, etc., can lead to inside the skin changes such as in-gene expression, the microbiome, or other factors that affect health or behavior. So I know Susan Rollman, who's on the line, was part of the group that developed these particular bullets. And keep in mind, every single word in each of these bullets have been sweated over in terms of trying to convey the interest areas. That's why we as program are particularly interested in people responding to these bullets and responding with research problems that address these bullets. I hope I'm making that point. Okay, third and final page.
Grace?
Yes,
Grace?
read the question?
Yeah, on the previous slide on the high performance computing, I would just suggest a wording change there. Instead of models that require high performance computing, to have what seems like you describe as models that that influence or alter high performance computing, because just require high performance computing means you have a large job that you need a big computer to run. But
right, that's true.
But you said that doesn't count. So,
well, it's not that it doesn't count. It's just, you remember in my original tips to applicants, in order for us as program people to really understand what is the research problem that you're trying to address, because we have so many agencies involved now, and we all have our own interest areas, and in particular, Tom Russell, I think, is on the phone, and NSF and Dan Katz are interested in the research challenges for high-performance computing. They would want to know if that application is doing that, rather than just using high-performance computing.
Right. The wording sounds like you're just using it.
I agree.
It might be good to just alter that instead of require to say that influence or adapt high-performance computing. Something like that, I think, would be a lot more clear.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's a good point. Although we do, we are interested in applications that use it as well, but it wouldn't be the research problem of focus, right? you'd be using it as a resource, as an infrastructure, and we do talk about that in Section 1 as well, where DOE and NSF have provided resources for people to get some computing time to process their models. And so I wouldn't say that people who use high-performance computing shouldn't apply. It's just that wouldn't be the cutting-edge research problem that you're identifying.
Okay.
But I take your point, Bob, and I think it's too late to change the language now.
Okay.
But that's why I wanted to make it clear to people when we ask you for your identifying which challenges you're doing to do that. I mean, usually when I email people who send me letters of intent, I actually follow up with the clarifying question.
Okay.
So now I'll pause here. This is the list of program contacts for the 7 agencies. And actually, I failed to add the NHLBI because they just joined. But the NHLBI program contact is Pankaj Kasba. But let me just look at the folks on the list that I see right now. I know Susan, you're on the line. Susan Volman from NIDA. Do you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about NIDA's interest?
Yeah, I think I just turned my camera and my microphone back on, right? So you can hear me.
Yep.
And see me. So at NIDA, the National Institute on Drug Abuse, we're interested really in any studies that can address the problems, which can go from cellular mechanism, cellular genetic level, or on the other end, the sorts of things that Grace was pointing out that get more to our social behavioral interests. Broad range of neuroscience questions. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not really giving you any specifics, but just that those are the interests of our institute, and anything in that area from the sort of low level to the high level. Obviously, in terms of the multiscale, you only have to be doing, 2 levels at once. So I'm not saying we're looking for things that are going all the way, but we do have interest in all of those areas.
Thanks, Susan. And I see Tom Russell is on the line. Tom, do you want to say a few words about NSF?
Sure. I don't have a whole lot to add to what's there in Section 1. I mean, it's basically the NSF interest, as you would imagine, is in the fundamental science of multiscale modeling. So the the biomedical applications are great, interesting applications. The projects that would be most suitable for NSF would be ones that have implications for the broad underlying science of multiscale modeling.
Great, thanks, Tom. There's a bunch of people who use the phone lines. If any of you are IMAG program contacts, feel free to chime in at this point and identify yourself. Okay, if not, I have actually some words to convey from NHGRI. Mike Pazin is the program contact, and he said that the NHGRI Division of Genome Sciences is especially interested in work that advances the state of genomics, rather than the application of standard genomic approaches. NHGRI Division of Genome Sciences is especially interested in approaches that are likely to be generalizable across diseases and biological systems, and is unlikely to fund work with the primary goal of studying a particular disease or biological system. So those of you who are interested, please contact Mike Pazin from NHGRI, who is listed third down from the top here. He'd be happy to talk to you about your work. I know there haven't been that many applications coming in for NHGRI, so he's very interested in talking with you. Likewise, Greg Bloss from NIAAA, so right here under, next to, right underneath NIA. Greg Bloss is interested in talking with prospective applicants on the alcohol area, and they are very interested in behavioral modeling, population modeling. So I would encourage you to spread the word about that in terms of NIAAA's interest in alcoholism and alcoholic diseases. So talk with Greg Bloss. I actually should have updated the NIA program contact right now is Molly Wagster. And again, the NHLBI program contact is Pankaj Kasba. If you guys need connection information to them, just email me and let me know. Has any other program people joined and would like to chime in? If not, I will move on. So common review concerns that we experienced in the last 3 years is some very basic questions. Maybe as modelers, as the person writing the project, you may not have noticed it, so I'd like to remind you, make sure your model describes how it is multi-scale. So describe how you will link and integrate data between scales. Describe why your model is not just a single scale, but multiple scales. You only need 2 scales to make it multi-scale. And whether or not a multi-scale model is really needed to address the question you're asking. And it's not clear that this is the right method to use. These are some of the review concerns that have popped up. So these are some concerns that you may want to think about when you're explaining your problem, especially from the beginning. So again, IMAG is interested in a variety of multi-scale models, from the platforms of multiscale models to multiscale models that are hypothesis-driven. We do accept non-hypothesis-driven research, which is the development of the model itself, as a platform. So just be very clear on describing why your model is multiscale. Be clear on how your model is predictive. What are you going to do with the model? What are the new hypotheses that will be generated? This comment I highlighted in red, it's a shame that they didn't extend their predictions to other interesting questions related to the application areas. So once you get the reviewers to dream about your project, they always go beyond what you've proposed. So I would strongly recommend you draw the boundaries of your model and what you're covering within the proposal, and that you understand what is beyond that proposal that couldn't be covered, so the reviewers can understand where your boundaries are in terms of what you're covering with your model. But make sure you cover how it will be predictive. It doesn't have to be predictive right away, but it has to be eventually predictive, because that's the point of this initiative. And then finally, not clear on the modeling methodology. So these are some bullets that we gleaned from previous reviews, that you're forcing use of a method without really addressing the question. You're not critical of your own methodologies. What are the limitations? How will they address them? What are the alternative approaches? Is this a cutting-edge method that you haven't proven yet? And how are you going to show it's going to work? How are they calculating X, Y, and Z? So again, these are some of the details that reviewers would like to have. And with writing proposals, it's always hard to balance out these details with the page limits. But if you've drawn out your boundaries of your modeling, then hopefully you'll be able to clearly define what the details of your method are based on what you're drawing your boundaries on. Any questions? So this is what will be presented to the reviewers. So programmatic issues are that we do have specific requirements now in this reissue. We do require that you have a compelling multi-scale problem, identified one of the breakthrough challenge bullets, which I just described to you in those 3 slides. We are interested in both new and existing models. So reviewers should not ding you if you already have a model in place and then you're trying to apply it to a compelling multi-scale modeling problem as identified by one of the challenge bullets. You just need to explain why your existing model, how your existing model is being modified to address one of these bullets. We require that the model is multi-scale, so the model must cross at least 2 scales and at least 1 linkage between the scales. We require you to have a mechanistic explanation of the representations underlying the biological, behavioral mechanisms and processes. So remember, these models are supposed to focus on biological, behavioral, biomedical, clinical, environmental problems. So you should have mechanisms of these processes in the models. The model should be predictive. They should have a convincing technical plan or approach for achieving predictive outcomes from the proposed multi-scale model. The data that you use for the model should be identified and appropriately justified for each scale and the multi-scale linking model. As you can read in the guidelines, we strongly encourage you to use secondary data that's already available, benchmark data. We encourage you to benchmark your own data. So that's the data part. And finally, we do encourage you to design your model such that the model architecture will facilitate future model sharing. That's a plus for us. As you all know, in the Multiscale Modeling Consortium, we really encourage model reproducibility, reuse, model sharing. And so in order to do that, the architecture you use to design your model should facilitate that. Any questions?
Grace, a question on model sharing. Well, you didn't say requirement for. When will the transition occur when we'll be really required to produce code that is reproducible and usable by others?
We're touching on that. It's coming up in a few slides, Jim. Okay?
Okay.
Hang on. But I just noticed that Bill Cannon had sent a group chat. So he's asking what is meant by population. Is this referring to a human population or more of a general population such as cell or agents? So Bill, to answer your question, we are referring to all. So because we have multiple agencies on board, NIH, of course, is interested in humans and also animals, and but the other agencies could also be interested in populations of cells and agents and bacteria and whatnot. So as long as it fits into the the biological term, I guess, is the one that's most generalized.
So Grace, can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
So if we're looking at NIH in a human population, disease population, I'm interested in the population level of the microbes in the gut that influence human health. Mm-hmm. Is that relevant to NIH, or is it the clinical population?
No, that's relevant. So if you're doing population modeling where you're developing algorithms and methods that use population modeling methods for the microbiome in the gut, that would be the novelty of your multi-scale model.
Great,
so,
thank you.
Again, I would refer back to those section 1 bullets where we have at least 5 or 6 bullets on population modeling and behavioral processes and interventions. All those things could apply to what you just said. Does that help, Bill? Did I answer your question? Yeah? Okay. All right, so we will move on. So specific topics of interest. Again, this is presented to the reviewers, and we're telling the reviewers we've written section 1 bullets to encourage the community to stimulate the community with new ideas and unique methods to pursue a multi-scale problem. That's why I read to you every single bullet from those 3 pages, is to really get your juices flowing. You may think of something else that's even more challenging or equally challenging, which you can present as well. But the idea is to push the envelope of multi-scale modeling to think of new ideas. And we recognize that these bullets are pushing very difficult challenges, and so the reviewers have to understand this and understand and identifying the application, whether or not the investigators have taken up these challenges or something similarly challenging. That's why it is important for you to identify the bullets that you're addressing. I know you all have your projects in mind and you want to just jump into responding to the projects, but it would help us tremendously from the program side and from the reviewer side to really understand which challenges you're addressing, so we can identify your project. Are the investigators expanding in an existing model, and if they are they using the existing model to address the challenges? So the proposal requirements. So we're getting to your point, Jim Bathingthwaite. So it has the required multi-scale modeling consortium plan, which we had in the last 3 years. So again, we created this initiative with a cooperative agreement mechanism to basically make the consortium a funded mandate. So early on, for those of you who are in the consortium, 10 years ago in the heyday, the comment was, we'd love to participate, but we don't have any funded mandate to pursue these activities. And so this is making it a funded mandate. So I would encourage you to use this consortium plan to budget activities beyond just traveling to our meetings, possibly budget, workshops, curriculum development, things that you want to do within the community that might need some dollars. Use that as a consortium plan, and use the consortium plan as a way to address issues that can only be addressed with a group input, community input. So take advantage of that. So here's to you, Jim. This is the new addition, is the model credibility plan. And for those of you who are involved in following the IMAG MSM Credible Models Committee, we've taken up a lot of what you have discussed in your committee and put it into this model credibility plan. So we are asking applicants to draw up this plan to describe the strategies and methods for evaluating the credibility of the proposed model, to address the questions of interest within the intended domain of application in biomedical, biological, behavioral, environmental, clinical research. We are asking you to propose a third-party evaluation of your model within the period that you're requesting the proposal. And the intention is to move towards model sharing and reuse in the community. So Jim, this is the first step where we have the proposer, you all as the modeler, allow a third party to evaluate, first of all, whether or not your model is credible based on the strategies and metrics that you're proposing to evaluate credibility, and whether or not that person can actually use it. So the idea is, once we have this, we'll engage more of the consortium as well to do this evaluation. So the idea is, once your project is funded, you have a model credibility plan, you'd work with the program people who are funding you to determine who would be a good third-party evaluator. It could be people in the consortium. You would probably budget some funds here if you needed to budget people to dedicate time and effort towards evaluating your model. Does that make sense? Any questions on that?
Grace,
Yeah.
question on that. One of the problems with big models is that they're really hard to dig into and understand. And therefore, large models require a subsidiary set of sort of learning models. They may be individual teaching models, or they may be stepping stones on the way to putting together the big one. That's a lot of extra work beyond the central model. Can that be supported by these programs?
Let me see if I can understand your question, Jim. So you're saying, can a larger model infrastructure be supported by this FOA? Right.
To make it educationally palatable and usable by others, it takes a training program for a really big model.
So in the proposal, you would be developing an infrastructure for training people to use the model?
correct that it's if you've got a multi-scale model that has, let's say, 100 or 200 individual models within it, and you want to put them together in an understandable fashion, then one needs to have an understanding of all of those pieces, and that takes a lot of teaching in a way. You can't just plug in and drag in a new piece without understanding it.
Right. Well, if you are using your proposal to create that architecture where you have modules of the different pieces and you're plugging it in together as part of the research, that would fit this initiative. You could in your consortium plan propose to train people to use that architecture. It depends on where you are in the pipeline, I guess, of developing it. And you could also, in your credibility plan, ask people to evaluate the architecture and the use of it. Does that help? Does that?
That certainly helps, and I think there are different kinds of training for different aspects of a model. For example, if you have a big biochemical system that's part of a mechanical model, then that's a different outlook on how to learn it.
Yeah, I mean, does anyone else have a comment to make?
Hi, Grace. This is Yoram Vodovos from
Hi,
University
Yoram.
of Pittsburgh.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I was just getting back from a flight, so I've only been able to call in. But I have a question in this regard, because it's still unclear to me. When you're saying third-party evaluation and the mechanism that you appear to be proposing, which is that the relevant program will decide who it is that should evaluate, and yet you have to write in advance, not knowing who it is that will actually get to evaluate it, and then you have to somehow budget funds that will be, I guess, turned over to that group that will be evaluating you, and you don't know what their requirements are going to be. So it makes it sort of complicated to be able to set that up. I mean, it's either that we get to decide in advance that we're going to collaborate with Group X, let's say, that isn't involved in the direct development of the model, but that will be some sort of an evaluation group. Let's say I'm at Pitt and I have colleagues at CMU. They're in computer science, so they know something about modeling, and I say I'm going to have them do some usability, and then I can budget some direct amount of money because I can talk to them and I know what they'll need. Otherwise, how do we go about doing this?
So you could name people if you wish, although from the review's perspective, Manana can chime in, you would put them in conflict from reviewing your application. So if you're fine with that, you could do that. I've been advising people to put in the types of expertise that you would wish for the third-party evaluator, so that would avoid the naming people problem. But it's more that you have an idea of who you think would be an appropriate third-party evaluator and the types of requirements that they would need in order to evaluate. Now, I've had people ask me, well, if they really want to evaluate from the ground up, it could be the whole proposal itself. It could cost the entire proposal to do the evaluation.
Well, I could tell you this. If you, as IMAG, approached me and said, we're deciding to fund project so-and-so at University X, and, they need someone with your qualifications, and they've budgeted all of, 1% effort and $1.50 in your time, and you have to do it, I would say, I actually don't think I will. So I'm trying to understand how it is that this mechanism would work, because every single proposal is going to come up with their own idea of what it takes to evaluate their work, and yet somebody at program has to find someone else that will take it on those terms. It would almost make more sense for you to say, we have set aside X amount of funds, standard, like the equivalent of, say, getting reimbursed for travel to a meeting. We have set aside X amount of funds for this activity, regardless of the project. And then you just generally suggest the class of evaluator or the qualifications of the evaluator. Otherwise, you get into all these questions that were being asked, and they're all very reasonable questions. You know, if my model is very big, what if my model requires a fairly specific expertise that isn't in the consortium? So either we have to identify in advance who it is that would be tapped for that, what they require, and what they already have in advance thought would be necessary to do that properly, or you have to decide in advance that you're setting aside those funds and they're set and they're fixed, and it's going to be, you know, under these 4 bullet points, and that's it. Because I think otherwise it's really a major headache to try to figure out how to do this.
Right. I hear you, Yoram. And so when you say you're saying that IMAG should set aside funds. Is that correct?
Right. I mean, essentially to say we're going to, if this is essentially a requirement, and it's got to be a funded requirement, because in today's funding climate, no one's going to set aside 20% of their time to be able to evaluate someone else's work because NIH says so, honestly. So it either has to be set aside and actually incentivize groups to become evaluators, which I think is probably what you want, right, in order to really make this happen. That's either what you would want, right? Or you say, here's a pool of people that we would consider to be the evaluation pool by whatever means that is, everyone that's ever applied or everyone in the consortia or whatever means you want, right? Or you say, we will set aside from this RFA X amount of funds to be able to support this specific activity. And then you have to put a value on it and stand by that evaluation. I mean, as I said, otherwise it creates a huge, you know, it's like you're guessing of a number, and we have to guess what that number is. It makes it very difficult for us as investigators to come up with what what would be seen as a sufficient and appropriate plan, because is the sky the limit on the funding for that evaluation plan? Is it $1.50 and you want to get change back? Is it, you know, somewhere in between? So that just makes it very, very difficult to hit that in a credible way.
So we have limited the budget for these UO1s to under $500K in direct cost per year, which is a large amount above a regular RO1. And you're welcome to use up to that limit, so $499 in direct cost per year. And so that is the reason why we have set that limit, is that you can budget up to that amount for any of these components. Now, we did not set aside funds from our end because we are asking the applicants to determine what they want to evaluate, and the reviewers to basically evaluate what the applicants are thinking about. So you may not want your entire model to be evaluated from ground up. You may only want a portion of it to be evaluated. You may see it from the point of view of a non-modeler who's looking at your model for the first time and saying, what would make me believe in this model? And what would it take for that person to believe in this model, to open it up, reuse it, play with it, and to reuse it in the community? So from that point of view, each model would have its own criteria and its own requirements and its own budget, and we're making it as flexible as possible. But I do hear your concerns, Yoram, and we'll see how it goes. I mean, this is the first time we're trying this out, and we're going to see how the reviewers take it as well.
Right. So, I mean, you brought up a very good point. What if someone who's an experimentalist would say, in order for me to evaluate this, I need to be able to run, you know, a year's worth of experiments in order to see whether the predictions that are made are any good? I mean, is that the level of evaluation? Because that's what we should be budgeting within our own primary aspect of our own proposal, right? Whatever validation we're going to do. So at this stage, you're saying evaluation with regards to reproducibility of the model, usability of the model, that type of thing. I'm guessing that's really what you're really after.
Well, you place your own criteria, and by defining the strategy and the metrics for evaluation, we even in the actual guidelines say if you don't have any strategies or metrics to justify that, so you can opt out of that. But the idea is that you would allow a third party. Now, the whole thing is that this is not something that we would just do while we're deciding on funding. It's after you're funded, we would work together with you on deciding, you know, who you'd like to bring in. It's a cooperative agreement. It's not us telling you who to bring in. You would suggest, well, I like to bring in doctors X, Y, and Z to do this and use these funds, and it's all negotiable.
Got it. So that was going to be my next question, is whether we actually have to say on who it is that we're working on that aspect of it. That you answered that. So,
yeah, like I said, you can name, but once you name anybody, you put them in conflict for review. Manana,
no, but I'm saying, I meant after presume after funding decision has been made, in the process of deciding who it is, then that's still a back and forth process with the PI, or in terms of deciding who that is. So you don't have to do it before review. You can do it after funding.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
You do it after funding.
Yeah. But I'm saying that way you don't put anybody into conflict for review.
Right.
Okay.
These are good questions. Thank you. Manana, did you want to add anything?
Yes, I just want to reiterate Grace's point that please do not name anyone and do not put any names. You just put a plan. How are you going to do it? But don't name anyone. As soon as you put a name there, this person becomes in conflict. So it's not going to help us in the review. Keeping this in mind, please.
Okay. You're welcome to continue sending me questions. Jacob, you had a question. Does evaluation mean a user of the model? One issue is that models need use by others, and a third-party evaluation can be a first step towards that. Yes. Evaluation is an evaluator by a user of the model. I mean, you could have other non-users, I suppose, evaluated, but the most beneficial is to have a user evaluated, a potential user evaluated.
Okay.
Some echo. Let me just silence everyone again, and you can unmute yourself, I think. Okay. All right. So 2 more requirements. So these 2 requirements actually are motivated by our colleagues at NSF, but they are requirements of all the applications that come in order for everyone to be considered for funding. And so we would ask you to include the broader impact statement, which describes the advancement of scientific knowledge and activities that contribute to achievement of socially relevant outcomes, such as diversity, STEM education. So it would be the non-research portions effects of your proposal. So this actually could stem really well with what you're proposing in the Multiscale Modeling Consortium plan, and how your model could impact the community in different ways other than the research parts of it. Does that make sense? And then the final one also is motivated by our colleagues at NSF, which is the data management plan. And this describes, this is a plan that describes the different types of data, standards, metadata, and the policies for reuse and the plans for archiving data. So basically, we want to know that you've put together a good faith effort to do this, and that we're interested in how you are managing your data. Tom, did you want to add any more to these 2?
Nothing major. It's just that this is an NSF-wide requirement, and it really is, the standards associated with it are community specific. So there's no attempt to have a one-size-fits-all standard. It's really meant to be a review criterion that will be evaluated by the community members who read the proposal and determine whether the plans are appropriate for their community. So in the context of MSM, it would be, again, the MSM community just evaluating whether the data plans were appropriate.
Grace, what about archiving of models?
So we do have in the guidelines, we do have a discussion about software sharing plans and how you're going to share your model. So those are not required, I guess, for different. The government policy actually is we're not supposed to require those elements. But in terms of software sharing, of course, you guys know that we strongly encourage it, model sharing, software sharing. The plan, you should include a plan that describes how you're going to do it. You may not be ready to share at this moment, but we do encourage you to put it in some place, someplace where you would be ready to share when you're ready to share. Such as we had huge discussions about sandbox type platforms such as PhysioNet, where you can, from the get-go of your award, put the start of your models and your data all there, put it in a place where it's secure initially, where only people in your group can share and discuss, but have it turnkey so that when you're ready to openly share, you can turn it to different levels of openness to larger communities as you feel more and more ready to share. And this way, you wouldn't have to go backwards and dig up all the information to allow for sharing. So that's something that we would encourage strongly. I hope that answers your question, Jim.
Well, only partly, Grace, because PhysioNet is an excellent place to put data. And they have the resources and the strategy for making that data available. One can put models on GitHub, but that's not organized from a model point of view at all. Right. And so it's our little Physiome repository has about 400 models, but it's not really manned with enough people to take on a huge load. And there aren't other models. That's the only one in the U.S. that takes in sets of models from other people. And we, don't have many other people using our as yet. But I think we need a national resource of some sort.
Well, the SimTK folks also take in models, and they follow a similar sandbox type of philosophy as PhysioNet, where they're taking in models where you have different security privileges, and you have it so that it's very easy to transfer the efforts that you put in one model to the next person by having it all on their SimTK page. I know Jacob uses SimTK, and the population modeling group actually has discussions on it. We've actually talked about putting a lot of the MSM models on SimTK as well, in terms of encouraging you all to put it there, to have a single place to look for them. This is a discussion we can have during the next Multiscale Modeling Consortium meeting, if you wish, Jim, to talk about organization and where to find things. But ultimately, we're serving such a broad community, we can't really force people to put it all in one spot, but the best we can do is for people to reference where they're putting their models as much as possible, either on our wiki site or in their papers, and so that people can easily access to them. So there doesn't necessarily need to be a one physical location, but an easy way to access them. That's just my point of view, but we can continue that discussion.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, we have about 5 minutes left. My screen is blanking out on me. All right, so this is the rest of the slides that we're showing the reviewers. I'll try to go a little bit quicker here. So we're just reminding the reviewers that this is not a typical cooperative agreement, so just wipe out any pre-assumptions. A lot of cooperative agreements at NIH are related to clinical trials, and this is not at all a clinical trial. So just to let them know that this is not one of those. And that the fact that we're negotiating milestones, timeline, the consortium plan, the credibility plan, all prior to award, using their comments, so it's really important that they make it clear. So again, this is giving this presentation to you all as potential reviewers to remember to close the loop, to just make sure that when you're reviewing, to to be very clear in your comments and recommendations, the purpose of the agreement is for the investigators to work cooperatively with program officers in IMAG. Fixable flaws are something we mentioned during the review as something that could be corrected prior to award that would not require a second peer review. And so reviewers should identify fixable flaws, and that fixable flaws do not need further peer review, and their scores basically shouldn't be dinging the applicants on fixable flaws. Manana, you didn't hear that. And so the model credibility plan, again, these are the review criteria that they're assessing the model credibility plan. Again, hopefully this will help you, Yoram, in understanding. I mean, you guys will probably likely wear both hats at some point. So, you know, just keep that in mind. As an applicant, you're writing it from your point of view. As a reviewer, they're seeing whether or not your plan is feasible based on how you've written it. To what degree have you used these metrics to establish confidence? Are the proposed timeline and budget proposed for the credibility plan appropriate? And then the note is actually for the investigators that we encourage you to allocate funds for the third-party evaluation, and do not list the names of the third-party evaluators. And the science officers will work together with you to determine these evaluations. So again, these slides are sent to all the applicants and also presented to the reviewers. The consortium plan, again, the reviewers are addressing whether or not it's feasible, whether or not you've devoted enough personnel and money and time and effort. Are the milestones and timeline budget appropriate? Are the activities appropriate? Are you guys as applicants proposing to co-lead existing working groups or proposing new working groups to co-lead? And again, the note to the applicants is that we encourage you to allocate funds for addressing unmet needs in the community. We expect awardees to co-lead working groups within a time period of the award for at least 2 years. Any questions on that? And then this is just telling the reviewers about IMAG, which you guys are all familiar with, and the consortium in which we are, our activities live on the IMAG wiki. I do encourage you to continue using it. You know, we're trying to get feedback on this new wiki. I know there's still things from the old wiki that hasn't been populated over, but we can encourage you to continue to use it. We have the working groups. This is, again, just informing the reviewers of the backbone of the consortium is focused on these working groups and the different efforts between IMAG and the consortium. And so this is the list of the current working groups. I think that's about it. So I'll stop here. I think we are almost at time, but I'll open it up for any questions anyone has.
Hi, Grace. This is Yoram again. So with regard to this, to throwing out the preconceived notions on use, so then there's no longer a requirement for there to be multiple institutions represented. It can be just multiple groups within an institution.
We never had a requirement for multiple institutions, but we've always had the requirement for diverse expertise, if that's what you're talking about.
Okay. My second. Okay. Yeah. All right. Sorry. So that was my misunderstanding. But the other question then is, are there any issues related to potentially collaborating with companies?
No. You're welcome to collaborate with companies.
Okay.
Don't have
and then, yeah. Sorry. So as long as they're able to live within the guidelines and so forth, then there's no issue with that.
Right, and we also welcome foreign institutions to apply as primary institutions as well as secondary subcontracts.
Okay, and then these all these various plans, like the consortium plan and the model, all these plans, they're all separate text from the 12 pages.
Yeah.
They're additional. Okay.
It tells you specifically, please put this on a separate page and put this heading on it, so our system will identify it and mark it as a bookmark in the scanned image. So it gives you instructions.
Got it. Okay.
So, and again, my presentation is on the wiki, so feel free to send me more questions later. but do go through the presentation. It explains, all of these details.
Grace?
Yeah, go ahead.
So to potential applicants, do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So just a few points. So when you're writing your application and you want to have advisory committee or steering committee, whatever you call, or really people who are endorsing your models or your project, please think about it. You don't, as soon as you put names, you put people in conflict. Leave someone to review your applications. So advisory committee, if you want to have it, you have it. You can explain the expertise you want to, consult and advise by, but don't put names. This is one point. Another point is that we have a new biosketch policy. So we have please find, there is on NIH OER website, if you need any additional information, if you don't find, let me know, I will send you a link. So make sure that you prepare this biosketch ahead of time, that you are not stumbling and doing it last minute. So it takes 5 pages. You can you don't put additional data into biosketch, but you can justify and you can tell reviewers why you are the person who would be doing the best this project. And the third point is the new resubmission policy. You know that you can send your application as many times as you want to, but I would recommend think before you send. But if you are sending your application that was reviewed, especially in the MSM panel, so don't mention anything about previous review. So don't mention that you responded on to reviewer had this critique, say we have changed, we revised, we improved. Don't mention any scores in the application. As soon as we find out, we will remove this application from the review.
Well, you're referring to those applications that are coming in as new applications, right, Manana? They can use this mechanism to resubmit to a previous U01 application if they've never resubmitted before. And in that case, they would have an extra page for introduction to talk about the previous review and how they responded.
A1 application will have a 1-page introduction, and you must have but if you are submitting third time after 2 reviews, you are submitting as a new application without any mention of the previous review. Okay, so that's all on my point.
Thanks, Manana. So all of you, if you're not applying, you're welcome to serve as reviewers. My final point is I will send any apologies out to anyone who I've not responded to your email. I am sorry. I've been quite swamped. And so hopefully this webinar has answered some of your questions. If you still would like me to respond, just send me another email and I'll try again. But just be patient. I will get to your answers. And again, please use the program contact list too if you have any focused areas that you'd like to contact the other IMAG contacts. That would be very helpful also. Any other comments? Does any other IMAG folks want to comment? If not, we'll continue online, and thank you all for participating. I'll adjourn the call, and have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Bye.